Thank you very much. This is the third episode of Spectacular Singing, our new season, where we are having plenty of ornaments and high notes. And for today, we are having a waltz that celebrates the arrival of spring.
Der Frühling kommt, alle Zeit, so viel mal Zeit, alles ist nicht weit.
And as I just mentioned, it is a waltz. And as I have put the score on the screen, we have a 3 by 4 time signature, which in fact is a time signature for the waltzes. So in last episode, but for the other season, Katia shared with us that a 4 by 4 is the easiest. It's like for the beginners, but a 3/4 timestamp is more like I'm not sure if I would say rhythmical or predictable. How would you describe this 3 by 4 timestamp on the for the waltzes?
Well, I think that is something that it feels like pretty natural. I mean, usually when we start to study music, one of the most easiest rhythms to assimilate is 4 by 4 because it could feel like our heart that beats at twice. But I feel like 3 by 4 probably like part of our child games. I don't know. It's like easy to understand. I feel it pretty simple.
And one of the greatest creators of music, waltzes, in fact, Johann Strauss II, the son of another musician from Austria, them both, composed this one. And I forgot to mention that, in fact, this is the second time that we have Mr. Strauss invited to our program because our opening program, Adele's Laughing Song from the Fledermaus, is in fact from the same composer. So it turns out that I would like, in the maybe Katia will agree, maybe not, that there are these composers like that exist to make us feel fine. And I could say that Strauss, he is the case as well. Like most of the times, with very few exceptions, Rossini, but you're most of the times having fun unless you're watching Guglielmo Tell, which is a horrible drama. But except for that, usually when you think of Rossini, you think of life is to enjoy. You think of Offenbach and you say life is to enjoy. And you think on these waltzes and this Die Fledermaus by Maestro Strauss, and you say, hey, life is for having fun. Life is for spending the time we are on this existence with the best we have. Because I don't know about you, and this would be my first question, Katia. When you select an aria, when you select a next piece, the song, your next move on your repertoire, what do you have into account? Because pieces of music for coloratura, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of pieces from the Baroque, from the all or the earliest Baroque till the most recent ornaments that some recent creators, music creators have worked on until recently. So out of these many pages of music, how do you come to select these Voices of Spring by Maestro Strauss?
Well, it's not. We were joking about. It's not just about select a piece of music because you can sing a lot of notes per second. because in case of Baroque, you can be singing even sacred music, and it's not happy music. In this case, you are praising God. In Baroque, you could be singing drama. For example, I sing also Cleopatra by Handel, and there are several dramatic parts with plenty of agilities and many notes per second. So that's not the main reason. Um, of course, it's part of your coloratura skills, and it's fine to use them. But in this case, I think that I choose this song mainly because of the character. It's um, it's about spring, it's about flowers, it's about birds, and I think that sometimes we need a little bit of this nature and freshness.
And this, in particular, your approach for this piece is that you once saw run into the score and you say, "Hi, it looks fine," or you heard it in another singer's voice and you said, "I'm going to have my own version of the song." What happened? How did it happen?
Well, particular with Voices of Spring, I heard I heard this version. Well, I know this waltz since I was a very little girl, but I knew the instrumental piece, as many of us probably have approached to this song, to this waltz. But later I heard a version by Ernestina Garfias, this light soprano, this like Mexican soprano. And well, my first approach was to this waltz with an Italian text, so I could understood what she was saying, and I liked it not just for the music but for the content. So I thought it could be a nice try to study this score, and well, then when I was better documented, I found out that it was in Dutch, so in German. So it was challenged because German is pretty far away from Spanish, but I think that I could resolve it, and I loved every bar that I started to work on.
Yeah, you mentioned a horrible habit of the 50s, mainly in the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, and 60s of the past century, this horrible habit of putting everything into Italian. German music, why not singing Fidelio in Italian? How can you think of Fidelio in Italian? Well, there are Fidelios in Italian. Ah, the magic flute, the silver flute. Ah, let's do it in Italian. Why not having it in Italian? It loses all senses. Ah, verter in French. Let's do it in Italian instead of pourquoi me réveiller à non mi ridestar. I mean, how
Yeah.
is it? Carmen, the very famous Carmen in French. No, for more people to understand, let's sing it in Italian. So many horrible things have happened in Italian, and many great singers have come to join it in Italian. And of course, the great singer Ernestina Garcia said, "Why not?" Strauss might be from Austria. His language is German. I really don't care. I'm going to sing it in Italian. And so the thing about it, and we have talked around this matter in other episodes and seasons, is that it's not only that there is a language in which it is written, it is because the measure, the accents, the whole flow of the idea follows the natural language of the composer. So when you change the words, then suddenly something doesn't match. So suddenly something doesn't make sense. And if the only thing the singer had to do was to study the language, man, go and study the language. Thanks God. Fortunately, there are very few cases now where you change the language of the opera, but still you can. The Queen of Spades, La Pique Dama in French is usually sung in French instead of La Pikavaya Dama in Russian, which happens to be the same thing. It doesn't really make sense. But well, enough of the examples. Now that you have shared how you first approach this beautiful piece of music, the next thing that if you would like to share with us is where do you actually start? There are too many notes. You start in order, you start with the ornaments, you go for the most difficult passages, you first arrange or put yourself with the mood, or you first put yourself well arranged with the tempo, where to start. And I think it could be of help because when you have slower music, I mean, there are not too many notes, but there are fewer things to care of. But here you go, do I go for the staccati or do I go for the C's or do I where where do I start in order? Does it really make sense to start in order? How do you start putting all those ideas around a piece of music like this one?
Okay, my advice would be don't study, just listen another versions. Make your own. It's a very complicated song. But no, seriously, what I usually work from the beginning, it's note by note and then phrase by phrase, because in this case, there are not just a lot of notes, but there are also lots of alterations. So if you try just to, of course, there is an harmony and there is a sense of the song. There are not just random notes, of course not. But if you just want to, let's see, we have here B and an E, B flat and E flat, and you want to stay with that idea in your mind, this is not going to work. So you have to understand note by note and then phrase by phrase, because well, there is a tonality, but there are interesting moves here. So this is what I do from the beginning. Understand note by note and then phrase by phrase. If I found, well, for example, this first phrase, there is a semitone. Okay, solved. And then I start to speed it up. And so on and so on. The second part, it's pretty similar. It's pretty similar, so I didn't have a problem here to understand what was going on. But if I go ahead and find a phrase that probably I'm not understanding at all, I try to vocalize it. Um, I move it down and I move it up in pitch, and try to get more familiarized with the figure that I'm abording.
There is an expression in Spanish that maybe you use, but I have heard with other singers because in Spanish it makes sense. I really don't know how to say it in English, but in Spanish it is poner en gola, which means sort of mm, finding or making your instrument familiarizing your instrument with the heights and the movements that it has to do. Because when you read it at first sight, which is one of the reasons I don't like the first sight readings, because your instrument is not ready and then you suddenly go and then middle and then low. I know the justification for those exercises. But out of that, you never get art. You just get a musician in the rush of trying to read everything and committing mistakes. So, oh, it was the mixed voice was not properly placed. Oh my God, there is a that. So many things happening in his mind. But when you say that you're in Spanish, poner en gola, when you're doing that, then you like any muscle in our body knows what comes next. It's like the instrument has its own memory and it's ready for that. How long does it take you to do that? Poner, put something in the gola, as we say in Spanish. I don't know. I really think it really depends on each of the singers. It may take weeks or months or even years, depending on the difficulty. But I am thinking of slower versions or slower pieces of music. This one is way too fast. So the instrument is like.
That's why my first advice was sing something else.
But it is true that once the instrument is understand what he is expected to do, then you just have to fill out the words. As in these two pieces that you showed us, that in fact, if you read it in parallel, yes, you notice that they are basically the same. You're just changing the words. And sometimes we mess with the words. That also happens. Tenors do that very often. La solita
And if it's
storia.
in German, it's probably worse.
It is in German, it's going to happen something horrible as well. But I also, besides that exercise of making your instrument familiarize with what he's expected to do, there is something very interesting here, and it because they play a major role, and is what in English is called the rests, which in Spanish I like more the word silence, but we have said that silence, pause, or rest are not really good words because they may convey the wrong image. But this thing that we are going to call in English the rest, because you play ta-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra, and then you make these silences are very meaningful because you have to stop the sounds in a given way so that the silence flows, and then you go for the following sounds in a given way so that all the pieces feel like please excuse me for the comparison, like if you were building a Lego. You put the
Yeah.
incorrect part there, the others will not fit. But if you put everything correctly, then you listen when the violin or the next chord is starting, and it ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ta-dan, 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 and it looks and it sounds very, because even that is also very important. The way you have to add the right sound to your voice, you cannot do it as mechanical as is Olympia.
No,
It
no, no,
it is
of
not
course.
the queen of the night. It is something that flows. How do you work on giving that sound to this music? How do you reach the moment you say, I like now the way I am making it sound?
Well, I work a lot with my air. If that doesn't give you the sensation of floating and move, nothing's gonna will. Yeah. Sometimes I don't vocalize it literally with a vowel, but with air. So that makes me feel a single line, and it floats. And then, well, when I start to sing with the text, you can understand the articulation and the pitches, but it's within this same line. And you don't find that I'm singing and there is another sensation, completely different.
And now, also, as you mentioned, that working on that sound uh, helps you in making sure that the homogeneity of the sound for what you're pursuing is kept, it's because if you look, even though there is a semitone, you are again reaching the lower notes or the lower register of the voice of the soprano until you reach it is not the highest, but now you're clearly in your higher register. So even though this exercise may seem innocent and simple, it's anything but innocent and simple
She's
because
just saying.
yeah, it is not just like that because you have to keep that quality of sound that you're looking for from a lower region in your register and while you're playing, because if you notice it is not the scale, it is not that it is not that you're not just ascending, you are playing like in a wave. In fact, that's what I would like to say. I think that I find this French instrument, I find it playful. It's like playing with the notes and with the music, because it's
It's like dancing a waltz.
exactly.
So the pauses, the silences should not be heard as you're cutting off the sound. It's like when you are dancing a waltz and you probably give a turn and you leave your partner's hand, but you're not cutting the dance. You leave the hand, but you will return to the hand. So you have to feel that sensation and you have to communicate that idea.
You have to make sure that this silence, this pause, this rest continues, and everything is planned to continue. Why don't we move ahead, because in fact we mentioned it for these two first pieces, but in fact there is a third one that also changes the words, but in fact the same series of notes that are sung. On the third group of the stave you have der Fühling in Holderplacht, but for the first time in this third, there is a change because you're going to go for the sounds that everybody recognizes. Maybe nobody understands unless you speak German and you know the words. Because we also have to mention it. There are so many sounds happening in a short amount of time that many people do not care if it is Symphoniker Minded House or if it was something else because it's moving really,
Nobody's
really
paying
fast.
attention. Nobody's paying attention.
But it doesn't mean that the coloraturas should be getting away with saying whatever they want. They still would need to adhere to what is being said. Only that the public will not be able to understand. But even if they are not understanding, they know what I remarked on the screen. This sound, which is not particularly difficult for your tesitura, because it's clearly manageable. The highest is a do if I see well, and as we
It's
mentioned,
for the middle part.
so who cares for a do? So not so impressive, but it's not about the how impressive that do that C is. It's the way you're going to wrap that sound so that you jump in the a because it is the same sound. It is a jump to the do, and then there is a semitone, and then there is a slightest change as well, and then you go and you lose those semitones, and you go for another series of descending and then ascending, which is very small changes in the pitch, but that have to be sounds beautiful, lovable, playful. Uh, do you pay special attention to these ones, like this group of sounds, or
Yes, yes. Well, now that I'm paying attention once again to this score, I'm thinking, what the hell was I thinking when I tried this?
I said yes too soon, right?
Yes, I didn't think it well.
It appeared
Well,
easier.
yeah. In this part, we find crescendo at the first but please remember, it's not turandot. It's like just letting your air flows a little bit um, a little bit, ah, oh God, um, un poco más libre, un poco más suelto.
Yeah, like letting the voice freer, like
You
looser,
you
not
can think,
stiff.
yes, yes. Just give it a little bit more of distance. You don't have to impress with this C. It's not a 20 bars C. It's just an expression.
Which is much easier to be said than it is actually to be done.
If you're not a coloratura,
It is
because it has everything to do with it. If you, because I've seen some friends trying to sing something like this, and if they're not coloraturas, they really have to make an effort. They really have to study in the bad sense of the word, because I studied, but it doesn't represent an extra effort for my voice.
I didn't
It's part of me.
I didn't know you had some people, which are if they are not coloraturas, then maybe they are either leggero or lyric, which could be even worse. But because I cannot even imagine it in the voice of a lyrical soprano, it will lose all its charm. Because one of the qualities of the coloratura voices is to reach these high notes and sounds and flow and give much of light, bright sounds, but lyrical voices are really not made for that. But well, thanks for trying.
We will call you.
Expect for the call. Thanks for trying.
Yeah, because I think that part of the art is to make it looks easy. It's not, but it has to make it looks easy. And if you're coloratura, well, you study, you have to prepare the score, but it's not difficult, as it would be difficult for some sopranos that are not coloraturas.
And I also think that is a comment that I would like to explore further because it's not in this, it's in the video blog entries that I have been adding on YouTube. By the way, which forgot to say that this is the premiere on YouTube because a month later it will be disseminated on Buzzsprout. But for the listeners on Buzzsprout, we have on YouTube some video blog entries, and I addressed that when I talked about those very, very infamous videos that are available on YouTube that say the top five most difficult arias for a tenor, the three most difficult arias for a soprano, and they compare Olympia or the Queen of the Night, they compare it to Turandot, and they compare it to Mimi, and you say, my dear, you don't have any idea of what you're doing. You can't because of course with the tenors they do the same. They are comparing Berter with Andrea Chenier and with Radames. They are three very different type of voices. If you ask a tenor, uh, a spinto, almost dramatic tenor, if singing Radames is hard, he's going to tell you, well, you need to be careful here and there, but it's really not. If you ask him to sing Werther, he's going to say, "Oh, I think I pass." And then you're not going to say, "Werther is impossible to sing." It's not impossible to sing. It's not the right voice for that. Same case as Katia just explained. If your voice is naturally gifted for ornaments and high notes, of course you have to sing as every singer has to sing. Of course you have to work to perfect it, to put it in time, the right tempo, the right duration, the right articulation, the right color, everything that any singer has to do. But it will flow naturally in your voice. But if you're not a coloratura, most probably nobody will like it, not even yourself. Don't force your don't force yourself into something that it's not going to work. Just imagine this beautiful. "Ah!" ta-da, with a full heavy voice of a lyrical, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So for that, we leave room for the person whose voices match this one. And we enjoy them doing this instead of you trying to put yourself into something else. So with that eye of informed critical thinking, of course, approach any material you find on the internet, but approach critically. So if you find that the guy there is comparing the Queen of the Night to Turandot or to Mimi, he doesn't have any idea of what he's doing. If you said, he's maybe comparing Constance to the Queen of the Night, maybe more similar, maybe more likely the same composer, but like that. But if he's comparing, for instance, what do you like? Olympia to Antonia, I mean, even if it's in the same opera, it's not for the same. Well,
No, 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 no,
there are
not at
few
all.
singers who can actually sing the three roles in Le Conte de Hoffmann, but they are in history. You can count them with one of your hands, and that they have done it correctly, of course, because there are many who have tried. I have the coloratura, but their Antonia is disastrous, or their Antonia is well, but their Olympia is to be forgotten. So that's
Yeah, sometimes we think that we can play an aria because we have the pitch, but imagine my voice is Costa Diva. I mean, I have the pitches, but not the color, not the weight of the voice. No, no.
And it is incredible how many people are around that pretend to know about opera and singing and say, Olympia, what is the highest note for Olympia? It is an E? An E.
Yeah,
So they say, if you have the E of Olympia, then you can sing Norma, because Norma, the highest, it's an E flat. It's the same note. No, it doesn't have to do with the note. It has to do, it is completely different type of soprano, the way she has to develop to play. There are many different characteristics. But let's go back to our beautiful melody of Voices of Spring today. Now that we have addressed our first group of this is there any other passage in particular that you would like to address? Because there are way too many ornaments, so we could spend hours going in detail.
well, fortunately, they repeat a little bit, so we can skip some parts. Well, I'm checking here that, for example, where we have a change to F major.
Hmm.
Spells will milder fro, milder glow, and look zur Jugend, Sonnenschein through mein alles new. To create a very notorious contrast between the staccatos and the legatos.
But it is,
Because
but it is way more difficult than that, because right after the scent, the change that you mentioned is, when we start with the Smers Milder, if you notice, because if you read it on the screen, again, for the people on the podcast, it might sound weird because they are not actually watching anything. But just in the change, there are not so many notes. It looks like we came from ta-da-dun, 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 and then the intention, um, the way you have to transmit the idea is still interesting. It is slower because the duration of the notes is longer, at least, but you have to be careful that you don't lose the inertia of what you are doing. Because I like the ornaments, and skip the following 6 bars and go for the following ornaments. So how do you manage? Because that also has to do with the expertise of the singer. How do you manage that after all these ornaments, you do something that actually links before we go for the staccati and the legati that we are going to develop as well?
okay, particularly here, I try to ever think about 3 by 4. I try to feel it at one beat. Schmerz wie wilder Froh, wilder am Weg zurück. Sonnenschein aus mein alles. So that helps me to keep moving the music, moving the air, moving my phrases, and you don't feel like you are coming from something very light with lots of notes and then pam 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 like we say in Mexico, chum
Chuntata.
that. No, please, because you are gonna fall asleep while you're singing.
Uh, Also, now that because you also mentioned it, and I would say that you went a little too fast if somebody wanted to notice it because you had your staccati and you ascended progressively in your staccati, I mean you were rising your notes, but your final legati is the highest of the three. But after the lacht and there is a series of ornaments, there is no pause for breathing. So notice that your final pause or rest for reading, written at least, is here, the one I am putting on the screen. Right after that, make sure that you have enough breath to do all of that. Because as I saw you in the clapping and doing the sounds, I told myself, if I were a singer who was studying on this part, I could say, wait a second, how do I handle this? Too many sounds ascending and this and the legato and this and this and then we have a scale and then I reach my B and then we finally reach a rest where I can take my breath. But it is very common, and somehow we mentioned it in the in previous programs. Think that your diaphragm is ready to have the amount of air that you need and that you are using that air wisely because it happens to many singers and I know that you will agree that they say I'm going to sing 1 2 3 4 5 bars and a quarter. Yeah, I have enough breath for 5 bars. But man, maybe you have never tried singing 5 bars without breathing. So by the final, instead
In
of
this pitch.
in pitch, of course. And so by the time you need to reach those ascending notes, you're already running out of air. And by that time, you're trying to survive so that you dismay on the stage or in your room if you're just rehearsing because you really didn't measure the amount of time, which is also the same mistake, even though the other is the horrible. Because thanks God the coloraturas don't do that, but the other singers do. The horrible habit that I keep repeating of rapping a long note with the but it's basic.
Oh,
If you're running out of air and you're not even having air. How are you expecting to to be ascending in your notes when you don't even have it? Or if you're barely having air, of course the final note will not be bright, beautiful, like a bell. It's going to sound strangled, opaque, low in pitch. It's going to be horrible. So,
well,
what would
I think that something that works for me and my students in cases like this, and well, in all the music indeed, it's try to read just a note in front of the other and the other and the other and the other one instead of reading up and down, up and down, because it is even more difficult to move your air and uh, your cohesion, and everything will be more complicated if you are uh, C G A B E F G. No, that's not going to work. Try to read from left to right and move your notes and move your air from left to right, one note behind the other. Um, That's my advice.
Because there are many ways that you can put yourself into trouble with these pieces. Because people think all you need is high notes and fairly nicely voiced, and with that you get away with it. No, you need to study more, because after having climbed and having had the time to take your breath in this rest, in this pause, you have a short little trill that is accompanied by a final. It's like like we have that expression also in Spanish, like putting la cereza del pastel. We have the putting like the cherry over the top of the cake. I'm sure in English it's not the same expression, but you just don't throw away like that. You don't throw it. That it has sounds again beautiful that it makes sense, and
Fans.
dance, and the trill is a little low. You usually drill much higher around the gym, and this drill is a little low compared to the area where you have to drill. But this drill is tricky because it's basically only comes a following syllable or a following word, and you rap.
Yeah, sometimes I feel that composers hate singers. Yeah, well, it has to do with the idea of not stopping the car at the red light. You just make a pass, but you don't turn off the car. Just there's a little pause, a little rest to take a little bit of air. Probably you don't have to take air. Well, in my case, I can't hold the phrase sing la until erwacht. If you can't hold the phrase, it's okay. Breathe in your rest, but don't lose what you've been working in this line, because it will be harder to recover and start from zero to make a trio and to finish the phrase.
Absolutely, but let me be the devil's advocate in this one. By doing that, you changed the complication of the positioning of the voice to be ready for the trill and the vact. You change that difficulty for another difficulty, which is having more breath, because we said you need to have air for 5 bars and a note, and now you need to have air for 5 bars, wait for the silence, and then the following notes. So you added more breath. At the end, the singer is like an administrator. Like he does most of his work is on managing air, and that's why there is always this good advice that always keep in your mind what comes ahead. Because if you waste too much air in a given phrase, the moment you find that you don't have time to breathe, it's going to become a disaster. And you will have to look at the pianist, or the pianist is going to like look at you, oh my God, what's he or she doing? This is not what we had agreed.
Yeah, you have to be very honest with yourself. You have to know your instrument very, very well and choose your battles wisely.
Choose your battles wisely, as you said. Nobody knows your instrument better than you do. Sometimes your singing teacher, but you know your own sensations. So if you know that the way you're keeping your breath doesn't work, I also liked the example that you provided, and it's like, but don't stop the car, because if you stop the car, you have to start, make a trill, and wrap up, and that's way too fast. Most likely, it will end in a disaster. So just put it on neuter on the on the car, so that you can rapidly move right after that small silence. Because yes, I also think it's more difficult if you really take all the air there. But if you're going to take only a little amount of air, you have to make also use of what you explained last time. Like you're not really sending everything to the lungs. Because if you want to capture all this air and send it to the lungs, you will not have enough time
That's not gonna happen. No.
to project it. So, and we keep insisting on breathing because breathing is one of the first things that Katia teaches you. Because no air, no singing.
Yeah, that's right.
Essentially, no air, no singing. And before we wrap up with a final comment on this one, I also wanted to remind you that if you are either making professional use or just because you want to have a healthy voice, that you can always uh, look or appoint an hour of singing lessons with Katia, of course, as many as you need, either for a specific purpose, as you are maybe in your final exams, or if you're just rehearsing a specific area, or maybe you're having troubles with your trills, or you're having problems with anything around singing, you can always book an hour of these lessons with Katia. You can find them on Kofi. In Kofi, you go to the store, and there you have the opportunity of booking that hour. If you feel like it, you can proceed as I just mentioned. And now, let's go. What other passage would you like us to mention as a wrap up for today's program?
Well, I found out this part. Well, I don't know if we are in the same page, but we are in de stroomt af, der Liederquell, der zu lang schon scheint zu schweigen, klingen hört dort wie der Rhein und hell, süße Stimmen aus dem Schweigen with a thrill.
Why not?
Why not? And then you find this
I found it.
okay.
These ones, right?
Well, it's not marked as an staccato phrase, but I think that it could help to think in every single note as the only one, because when we have this kind of figures moving by semitones, you can lose the pitch. It's easy to get confused, to lose the pitch, because the piano is sleeping in this part, the orchestra is sleeping in this part. It's you alone against the world. So study this part really, really slow. Uh, Find and be sure about your first note and the last one, because if you are clear in this part, you will know where to stop.
Because there are way too many things happening. I mean, as you say, you have I found that the Calderon is fermata. So the fermata, you have the fermata in the trill, but it's a little weird to think of a trill and a fermata, at least for the opening of the phrase. But well, Um, then you have the following
I know.
ornament that links to the final gen, and then you again don't stop the car, because if you already stop the car, the following phrase is simply not gonna work. It's not gonna work because everything, even if you read a silence here, truth is that all of this is continuous. The audience cannot have the sensation that you turned off the car. So you start with all these ornaments and the difficulties on the semitones that Katy explained, but why not? He added a diminuendo as a final trick of difficulty because he had already written a forte. So the composer wants you to play with the dynamics so that it doesn't just feel the change in the height of the frequency of the note. He's also guiding you to play with the volume of the notes. So playing with the volume while playing with the height of the notes is usually something that also usually ends in disaster because it's much easier to keep to keep I keep everything forte. He said diminuendo, I don't care. It's forte everything. How many? Six notes in forte. I don't care. Oh no, and you get away with it because it takes much more advanced understanding of your voice to play with the volume as at the same time to play with the frequency or the height of the note. It's two difficulties in one. So again, Katia explained it very simply, but it's not that simple. It's more simple than
It's
what
simple when you practice a
it's
lot.
simple when you have many years been practicing it, because otherwise it's not going to work fine. And a way that you can determine if the version you're listening is was very well studied by the singer is pay attention to these details. When you notice that she plays with the volume, this time the volume is this, then the volume is higher, then there are legati and there are staccati and how she's rapping, and the trill is beautiful, and I notice the flow on how the pauses or the silences sound natural, and she restarts the car and feels like the melody is still moving on, then it is a good version. If it is just a woman crying out loud high notes and ornaments, it's clearly not a good version. Get away of it. Run as fast as you can and find a better version of it.
Yeah, that's right.
A final comment or a final part that you would like to share or to sing with us, Katia?
A final comment. Well, it has many interesting parts that even if you are not a coloratura soprano, you can take to practice, you can take to study. Have in mind that probably it will not fit you at all, and you will not share this on stage with the public. But there are lots of parts that you can take to practice, that you can vocalize, moving in pitch lower and higher, and will help you a lot for trills, for staccatos, for lines, for breathe.
And
So it could be used as an exercise also.
yeah, you know that some of the initial exercises for singers are the jumps of twos, thirds, fourths, and fifths. Well, this has plenty of those. Of course, as
Yeah.
Kathy explained, don't expect that your next experience on appearance on a stage will be singing Voices of a Spring. Most likely not.
It doesn't have to be.
But also, as we explained before, even or moreover, maybe moreover, for lyrical and heavier voices, it is advisable that you exercise some agilities.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, as we also explained, you will end up having a horrible cadenza in la donna mobile. So, how do you know that a tenor never exercises agilities? Listen to their cadenzas. Or listen or how they try a trill. So, how do you know that Domingo and Carreras don't have a trill? Compare their trill in O Sole Mio to Pavarotti's, and you notice that Pavarotti knows how to go for the trill. It sounds
If it sounds
well,
like vibrato, well, it's not a trill.
but what Carreras and Domingo did on that recording is just horrible because it was not really a trill. It really wasn't a trill. But it happens only because they never exercise their agilities, and every singer with their resources should be exercising some
Yeah,
agilities.
you can have your own agilities.
But exercise them. That would be the advice.
Yeah.
Final word, Katya. We're wrapping up.
Well, if you are gonna approach to something like this, and even if it's complicated or difficult, try to enjoy. That's it. If you are not having fun, well, I think that's not the purpose.
And that's why I mentioned at the beginning. This one is so playful, so lovable that one likes to enjoy. One has to feel fine after having sung it. And well, with that being said, thank you very much for having joined us on this third episode of Spectacular Singing. Thank you very much, and see you very, very soon.